A very warm welcome to you, Gavin.
Good evening, Hannah.
I suppose one of the things that you were saying is that funding is probably top of the list of the huge challenges that Africa faces when it comes to being a player in the market.
Yes, it's not just unique to Africa. It's globally bioenergy, which is a often misused phrase because people don't define whether it's solid biomass or liquid fuels or biogas. Bioenergy is a sort of an all-encompassing name. But globally, risk investment at the forward end of projects that need to get traction and piloting to get to commercial level is basically very, very thin on the ground on a global basis. In Africa, Africa is seen as a low-value asset because it's got lots of natural resources. That's green Africa. Yeah, some predictions say that by 2050, it could be the second largest provider of biomass renewable fuels. Mm-hmm. But of course, infrastructurally, it's and from an investment point of view, there are literally hundreds of projects that need to gain early finance to do that.
Well, let's just talk about who the funders would be. Who can potentially fund into this industry?
Well, funders, the conventional model of funding in the standard commercial world of venture capitalists and angel investors and debt from conventional bank sources.
But what was interesting to me is we were talking about this before the interview started. I was saying to you, well, this seems to be the direction in which the world is going. Why then the difficulty to finance something that the world is saying that it needs?
Well, I think that you know, some people call it just business as usual. Is that many funds are still looking for double-digit returns in single-year timeframes. The world has changed since 2008, and risk finance, which is what we describe as the bioenergy risk gap. Even you know, big balance sheet corporates are unwilling to now, because they're not getting the right confidence signals from governments who keep changing policies. It's almost as if policies are being and the market is being structured to halt progress rather than develop it. Because whilst carbon reduction is very key, obviously a driver to the whole process, the economic willingness to support the risk end of the market is not there.
But what is the potential for Africa, just as you were saying, just its ability to, or the potential for it to produce at such a mass scale?
Yeah.
Really, really huge. What is the potential for Africa, just in terms of if the policies could be in place, if regional integration could also come on board? What kind of monies are we looking at?
Yeah, well, I mean, Africa's in a strong position because it doesn't have the interregional policies that, say, in Europe, where we have the European Union, and it has, whilst the European Union has tried. So
would that be a disadvantage? Do you mean?
It doesn't have the disadvantage of over-regulation, over-policy. It's a case that it's as if the market needs to develop far more strongly, and then policies need to be implemented which help to support its continued development. But the biomass industry across the world, whilst it's getting some traction, it's not getting the traction that it needs when, you know, coal's falling below $100 a tonne, when demand is down globally. We have the conditions where renewables are no longer as hot a topic as they were. Africa's benefit is to use that space to develop strong infrastructural projects from your sugar industry, from new crops, from better land use and so on. And the proposal is to develop an incubator to do that.
And so far, have they been, when you talk about these incubators, what is the response been?
Well, the incubator model is completely new for finance. The idea is to have an incubation fund, which is a lot of global financial colleagues would support the idea of putting money into a fund that was put into, if you want to coin the phrase, a clean pair of hands, where essentially projects can be incubated, brought up to the level whereby they become bankable, but they would be normally classified in the risk space, and the incubator is needed with a special type of fund subscribed widely from many different sources. But Nepad in Africa is one of the major coordinating agencies, and they have a mandate at the moment to try and put some traction, put some rubber on the road, make the market work. And we have lessons to be learned from Europe, from North America, from other places, where policy has been driven by the tenure of governments. And when governments change, policies change, confidence is lost. It's not that the renewable energy industry has has weakened in its desire to deliver. I just think that the time frames under which we're trying to make it happen are too short. We need to look at 15-year terms with 15-year policies, things that stabilise the market and therefore make it more investable.
One of the things that was proposed is projects in Southern Africa partnering with international bioenergy projects. How viable is that?
It's very viable where there are mature technologies but yet are still in the risk space, say in Europe or in North America, and there are good venture opportunities for companies across the whole of the SADC region or sub-Saharan region, because you've got one of the things that a lot of countries don't have, a lot of continents don't have. You've got one of the largest land banks of renewable and sustainable natural resources, but often that is seen as a low-cost asset at the moment. The danger for Africa is for investment to come in, remove those natural resources, take the value model off somewhere else, and that's why Africa could become with all of its history, becomes a great focus to try and retain value here.
So let's talk about this event. The Nepad Symposium is also described as a benchmark event. So when you talk about benchmarks, what are you measuring?
Well, our 50 delegates in a closed room environment essentially are from a very wide range of professional, government, non-government, banking, commercial banking, private. We're getting a consensus for what will make a bioenergy incubator and fund, particularly the fund, work. And the proposal is to take the fund model that is being evolved from this 2-day benchmark symposium, where we're talking Turkey essentially. We're talking about the reality of the bioenergy industry and where it is, the proper timelines for it, the certifications that should form part of the sustainability model. So it isn't words on paper now. We're talking about actually how do you deploy a centre or a hub that will attract the funding, get over the risk issues, and make then that model transportable to other regions.
When you talk about return on investment and the long-term investment, how good would those returns be?
Well, it depends on the type of investor. Obviously, there's a nice story about the economist's wife who said, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Well, in what context?" And it's a similar situation. Is that there are investors in the world who would like to put money into this space. They're a bit disillusioned with the way existing funds are not deploying the money necessarily.
Can some governments afford it? On the African continent, for instance, can some governments afford to be investing in this space?
Well, governments have said they want it to happen. They said that carbon replacement is our key goal. Yeah, but yet, and I've very close to many government people who have said, this is the policy you need to adopt, but it's taking them too long.
Because the reason I ask you is because some of the issues that are raised, potential to improve energy, food security, those are two things. We do have other challenges, but those are probably two of the biggest challenges we have when it comes to to our future here on the African continent.
Well, let me put it in context for you. The World Bank said in 2008 that by 2050, over 600 million people in Africa still wouldn't have electricity. Well, with a population heading for 9 billion at that stage, if 500 million people still don't have electricity, they don't have enterprise, they don't have access to the resources. You've probably got a PDA or a mobile in your pocket that you can talk to anybody anywhere in the world over the internet. Well, if you can't communicate, if you haven't got electricity, you can't communicate. If you can't communicate, you can't develop enterprise. And enterprise is the way out of Africa's problems.
Thank you so much for joining us, Gavin.